Quinn Maddox was doodling again. His left hand spun a pen in circles while his right sketched lazy spirals on the edge of his digital pad. Lines crossed into triangles, triangles morphed into cubes, and cubes collapsed into fractal nonsense. It wasn't rebellion. It wasn't boredom. It was how his brain worked. It always had been. The lecture hall wasn't built for comfort. The chairs were made for species with exoskeletons, and the lighting was adjusted to favor retinas that did better under ultraviolet hues. Quinn squinted toward the front, where a tall, glistening figure scribbled incomprehensible symbols onto a curved display. Instructor Chlorat was a Drexen, a species known for its mathematical rigidity and an almost religious reverence for order. It was shaped like a column of sinewy muscle wrapped in translucent membranes, and its voice had a buzzing quality that made Quinn's fillings ache. "You will now attempt vector recalibration exercise 3, Chlorat announced, sliding another set of equations onto the display. "Remember, your species' limitations are understood. Your attempts are sufficient evidence of your effort," Quinn frowned. "That's a backhanded compliment, right?" The girl seated next to him re-Andalin. Another human from the Earth contingent snorted. "Pretty sure he means don't hurt yourselves trying," Chlorat turned. "If the humans require an additional rest cycle, I will pause instruction." Quinn raised a hand. "Nah, we're good. Can I borrow your stylus, Re?" She handed it over. "Don't let him catch you doodling again." Quinn grinned and placed the stylus on his pad. He looked at the problem displayed, a multi-variable vector equation nested within a rotating three-dimensional manifold. He blinked twice, then started drawing. He didn't solve math the way others did. He didn't reduce or isolate variables. He visualized. He drew. He twisted the equation into shapes, then turned those shapes until something clicked. Today, the vectors looked like arrows in a wind tunnel. He mapped their paths, sketched the arcs of motion, and let the math emerge from the motion. After a few minutes, he tapped his pad and submitted the solution. Chlorat paused, reviewing. The Drexen's body rippled, a sign of confusion. "This result is accurate," Chlorat said slowly, yet it was submitted in under 70 seconds. Quinn leaned back. "I saw the answer." "You saw it?" "Yeah, like a pattern, shape shifting. I can't explain it in numbers the way you do." Chlorat's membranes tensed. "That is not how quantitative analysis functions. Mathematics is the language of precision. Patterns must be proven, not merely perceived." "Then I'll prove it the way I know how." Instructor Chlorat dismissed the session early. A dozen species shuffled out, some floating, some slithering, some walking. Re caught up with Quinn near the exit. "You're pushing it," she said. "That Drexen already thinks humans barely qualify as sentient." "He's not wrong. I forgot my socks this morning." "Seriously, though, what's your deal? You weren't like this in Earth prep school," Quinn shrugged. "I always thought in shapes. Equations feel like cages. But when I draw, I can move around inside the math." She gave him a long look. "That is the weirdest way I've ever heard someone describe vector calculus." "Thanks." The next day, Chlorat asked Quinn to stay behind after class. The chamber cleared until only the two of them remained. The Drexen adjusted the display to show a rotating four-dimensional model. "This equation was presented to my colleagues for doctoral-level research," Chlorat said. "It is not within your curriculum. I intend to demonstrate the disparity between your intuitive approach and true mathematical discipline." Quinn cracked his knuckles. "All right, let's try the hard stuff." Chlorat rotated the image. Quinn began sketching slowly, translating the rotations into intersecting arcs, then into loops, then into a spiraling lattice. He didn't speak, didn't blink. After 10 minutes, he tapped the table. Chlorat examined the result. The Drexen's body flattened slightly, a sign of astonishment. "This cannot be coincidence." "Nope," Quinn said. "It's doodles." The next day, Chlorat filed an official observation report to the Galactic Academic Board, requesting independent verification. Quinn wasn't told until 2 days later, when a delegation of 5 alien mathematicians arrived unannounced and asked him to sit a supervised test under neural observation. One of them was a Salkari, a race of hexapodal amphibians known for memory-based computation. Another was a Verne, who used photonic pulses in their skin to rapidly solve equations. Quinn sat among them, doodling fishbone patterns and spirals while they monitored his brain activity. He is not accessing standard cortical processing, the Salkari said, adjusting a probe. The signals are diffused, non-directional. Is he guessing? The Vern asked. No, Chlorat interrupted. His outcomes are consistent and replicable, Quinn kept drawing. You know I can hear you right. They ran him through 12 increasingly complex problems, each time he drew. Sometimes he hummed. Once he paused to ask for hot chocolate. By the end, the delegation was silent. He is not solving these traditionally, Chlorat said, yet the results are accurate. He's not cheating, the Salkari confirmed. His brain just works differently. The Vern flickered with color. Then he must be taught to process math the correct way. Quinn stood. Or maybe I just keep doing it my way and you guys stop pretending one method fits all species. Chlorat's body rippled again. This is not arrogance. No, it's survival. Humans adapt. You give us a wall, we draw a door. Chlorat remained silent for a long moment. Very well, you will be assigned an independent study module. You will document your methods. Cool, Quinn said. I'll need more styluses. The next 2 weeks were brutal. Quinn was assigned problems designed to test not just his pattern recognition, but his physical endurance. One equation required him to model a rotating gravitational field over a simulated 13-hour session. He developed muscle cramps from drawing. Another test placed him in a zero-gravity chamber to see how he'd adapt without a stable drawing surface. He floated, strapped a pad to his chest, and used his fingers instead of a stylus. I don't get it, Ree said when she visited him in the med bay after the zero-G session. You're not even getting credit for this. Why keep going? I want to prove we belong here, he said, rubbing his sore wrist. That we're not just lucky stowaways in a galaxy of geniuses. She touched his shoulder. You already have. He didn't answer. A week later, Chlorat visited his quarters with a new assignment. This is a conceptual paradox, Chlorat said. It cannot be solved. It exists to illustrate the limit of computational logic. Quinn stared at the diagram. He didn't draw, he just looked. Then he picked up a pen and began sketching a Möbius strip, then twisted it into a looped arrow, then turned that arrow into a tunnel with recursive pathways. After an hour, he looked up. It's not a paradox, he said. It's a perspective problem. Chlorat blinked. Explain. You're looking at it from outside the loop, but if you enter the loop, the contradiction resolves. Chlorat ran the model through his analysis software. The result came back flagged. Error, no contradiction detected. The Drexen stared at the message for a long time. You have redefined the problem space, he said. You did not solve the paradox, you removed it. Quinn leaned back. I didn't mean to, I just followed the picture. Chlorat turned off the display. This is not how mathematics is taught, Quinn nodded. But maybe it's how it's learned. Chlorat left without another word. 3 days later, Quinn received an invitation to present at the Galactic Symposium of Theoretical Constructs. It was the first time a human had ever been asked to speak. He didn't wear a suit. He wore his old hoodie, patched with duct tape and coffee stains. The symposium chamber was massive. Creatures from hundreds of worlds filled the seats. Quinn stepped to the center and pulled out his pad. I don't have a speech, he said, but I brought some doodles. He drew a circle. Then a triangle, then a spiral. He explained nothing. When he finished, the room was silent. Then the Drexen delegation stood and bowed. Quinn blinked. Is that a good thing? Chlorat approached. You have demonstrated a new form of cognitive computation. It is not superior. It is not inferior, it is simply yours, Quinn nodded. I can live with that. Ree met him outside after the speech. She tossed him a stylus. Don't lose this one, he caught it. No promises. They walked back toward the dormitory towers, the stars spinning gently overhead. Quinn's hand was numb, not metaphorically. Actually, numb. From the wrist down, it had stopped responding somewhere around the fourth recursive loop of a topological compression model. He dropped the stylus on the lab table with a clatter. I think I might be dying. Across the room, a six-eyed, gold-scaled technician named Velet rotated one of its optical stalks toward him. You are not dying. You are experiencing localized nerve fatigue. You have exceeded optimal repetition cycles for your species' musculature. Right, Quinn said, flexing his fingers. So, dying slowly. You were advised to pause every 30 minutes. I did. I just forgot which 30-minute chunk I was on. Velvet adjusted the ambient lighting, dimming the overheads to a level more suitable for human vision. It wasn't out of kindness. The Drexen lab had received a directive the previous week. Accommodate anomalous cognitive processors where necessary. Quinn had translated that as, no more excuses for burning out my corneas. You require neural rest, Velvet said, plugging a thin cable into the side of Quinn's tablet. I will process the remaining data and submit composite overlays to Instructor Chlorat. I'm supposed to refine that one manually. You cannot refine anything with a non-functional limb. Quinn groaned and rolled his neck. Fine, but I'm not sleeping in the med bay again. Last time someone tried to lay eggs in my boots. That was an error in housing protocol. The Iharn prefer warm leather for incubation. Yeah, and I prefer not waking up to squirming footwear. Velvet blinked all 6 eyes in sequence, then disconnected the cable. Return after rest. If symptoms persist, we will reevaluate. Quinn stood, massaging his palm. I'll be back when I can feel my thumb again. He exited the lab, weaving through the corridor. The campus was less crowded this late in the cycle. Most species had already entered their rest phases, though a few nocturnal ones were just emerging. He passed a group of gelatinous researchers humming in sync near the nutrient dispensers. One of them waved a pseudopod in his direction. He nodded, too tired to ask if that was a greeting or a warning. It was only when he reached his quarters that he realized he couldn't grip the door panel. He stared at it, annoyed. You've got to be kidding me. The door didn't respond. He tried again with his elbow, but the sensor wasn't configured for that. After a few seconds of futile flailing, it slid open anyway. Ree stood inside, holding a steaming mug and looking amused. You looked like a raccoon trying to solve a Rubik's Cube. Can't feel my hand. That's not funny. It wasn't a joke. She set the mug on the desk and pulled a chair over. Sit, let me see. He dropped into the seat. She took his wrist, tilted it, and poked at the base of his palm. He winced. Okay, yeah, that's still connected. You've got inflammation around your carpal tunnel, not surprising with how you hold a stylus. You anchor your thumb like it's a hydraulic clamp. It stabilizes the spiral arcs. It also compresses your median nerve. Sounds like an overachiever. She ignored that and grabbed a small diagnostic scanner from his shelf. She ran it over his hand and frowned as the display lit up. You've got moderate nerve compression, some tendon friction, and early signs of repetitive motion trauma. You need to stop for at least 2 days. I can't. Chlorat's expecting the compression overlay by tomorrow. Then he can wait. You're not going to do anyone any good if you lose function in your drawing hand. He sighed. This is what I get for being special. She raised an eyebrow. You think this is about being special? He didn't answer. She sat back. You're not the only one pushing yourself. The Verne delegation just lost a candidate to cerebral dispersal. The Salkari are rotating through memory burnouts faster than they can recover. Everyone's cracking under pressure, Quinn. You're just the only one doing it with a sketch pad. He looked at his hand. I didn't know about the Verne. No one talks about it. They treat failure like contamination. He leaned his head against the wall. I thought if I kept going, they'd stop looking at me like I'm some kind of fluke. She didn't respond immediately. Then she said, they already stopped. You just haven't noticed. He blinked at her. They're studying your process now, not ridiculing it. The Drexen are incorporating your spatial method into their simulation modules. The Iharn are trying to replicate your spiral logic diagrams using enzymatic ink. Even Velvet asked me if your cognitive loops are inheritable. Wait, what? Yeah, he thinks you might have a genetic anomaly. That's flattering. No, what's flattering is that they're scared of you. He didn't say anything for a long time. She stood. I'm going to get you a compression brace. Don't move. Quinn sat alone for a while, watching the shadows shift across the ceiling. The fatigue caught up to him all at once, like someone had dropped a weighted blanket over his chest. When Ree returned, she wrapped his wrist in a brace and handed him a vial of anti-inflammatory gel. He muttered thanks and fell asleep mid-sentence. The next morning, he woke to a knock at the door. He opened it with his elbow again. Outside stood a being shaped like a coiled ribbon of smoke, wearing a translation collar that clicked softly before speaking. "You are Quinn Maddox. That's what my ID says. I am Kethan of the Drow Assembly. I have come to observe your method. You're about 2 weeks late." Most of the alien brain trust already came and poked at me. "I do not come on behalf of the Assembly. I come at the request of Instructor Chlorat." Quinn stepped aside. "You want tea or a place to hover?" Kethan floated in and settled near the desk. "Begin when ready." Quinn hesitated. "You're not going to scan my brain. No, I will ask questions only after you complete your task." He retrieved a fresh pad and stylus, flexed his hand slowly, and opened a new diagram. The model was a dynamic probability matrix with non-linear feedback loops, something Chlorat had mentioned briefly but never assigned. As he drew, Kethan remained completely still. 20 minutes passed before Quinn stopped. "It's not done," he said, "but the central logic is stable." Kethan's collar clicked. "Describe what you perceived." It was like watching a crowd form a dance, but no one knows the steps until they've already moved. "Patterns emerge from chaos, but only if you don't interfere too early." Kethan's collar buzzed. "Do you believe your perception is predictive or reactive?" "Depends. Sometimes the image tells me where it's going. Other times I push it until it gives up a direction." Kethan hovered silently for a few more moments, then rotated mid-air. "You are not anomalous. You are a divergent heuristic processor." "Is that a compliment?" "It is a classification. Compliments are irrelevant." "Cool. Can you let Chlorat know I need another day on the overlay? My hand's on strike." "I will convey your status. He is aware of your injury." Quinn raised an eyebrow. "Then why send you?" He wished to know if your process degrades under physiological limitation. Quinn grimaced. "You could have just asked. That was the test." Kethan floated out without another word. By midday, Quinn returned to the lab with his hand wrapped tightly and a low-dose analgesic patch on his forearm. Velit gave him a flat stare as he entered. "You were cleared for rest." "Yeah, and I rested. Now I've got 40% grip strength and a deadline." Velit slid over a different stylus thicker, with a pressure-sensitive grip and reduced feedback resistance. "What's this?" "Modified interface. Designed for species with impaired extremity control. Do not thank me." "I wasn't going to. But I might name my first child after you." "Statistically unlikely." Quinn grinned and started drawing again. This time the lines were slower but more deliberate. He adjusted his arcs to compensate for the reduced mobility. Shapes formed with tighter control, less flourish, more intent. By the time he finished the overlay, nearly 4 hours had passed. His hand throbbed, but the model was complete. He uploaded it and turned to Velit. "Tell Chlorat the fluke held up." Velit didn't answer, but the corner of its carapace shifted just slightly. It might have been approval. Or digestion. Hard to tell with insects. As Quinn limped out of the lab, he passed an unfamiliar Drexen cadet standing in the corridor, staring at a display of his earlier diagrams. The cadet looked up. "Are you the human who draws?" "Depends who's asking." "I tried your method," the Drexen said. "It made me nauseous, but I saw something I hadn't seen before." "That's the idea." The cadet hesitated. "Are you going to teach it?" Quinn paused. "I wasn't planning to," he said. "But maybe." He kept walking, hand wrapped, shoulder sore, brain buzzing with unfinished spirals. Quinn's hand still ached, but at least it was working again. He could flex all 5 fingers without that pins and needles sensation shooting up his arm, which felt like a small miracle after the last week. The compression brace helped, but he'd also switched to using his left hand for opening doors, brushing his teeth, and swiping through hollow notes. It wasn't ideal, but he adapted, as always. Today, though, he wasn't doodling. He was sitting in the Drexen Department of Structural Logic, surrounded by 3 alien instructors, a scattering of academic observers, and something that looked like a sentient stack of accordion folders. The request had come the previous morning, calling it a review of method validity and instructional potential. Quinn had taken one look at the official seal and muttered something unrepeatable under his breath. Now he was here, and the display in front of him was showing a blank grid. "This is a pedagogical trial," said Instructor Norat, a Drexen with a longer thoracic ridge than Chlorat and a tendency to speak in clipped syllables. You have 30 standard minutes to demonstrate your cognitive process to 3 candidates of differing species. Quinn blinked. Wait. You want me to teach. You are to exhibit your method. Whether comprehension occurs is not your responsibility. Great. I'll just wave my arms and hope for the best. One of the candidates, a green-skinned biped with 2 sets of eyelids and a tendency to sway slightly from side to side, raised a tendril. Are we permitted to interrupt for clarification during the demonstration? Norat answered before Quinn could. No, all queries must be submitted after the observation period. Quinn rotated his neck until it popped. All right, let's do this. He stepped up to the grid and tapped in a few commands. The tablet transformed the screen into a rotating lattice of intersecting planes. He didn't look at the audience. He didn't try to sound impressive. He just started drawing a simple curve, then a loop, then a pair of mirrored arcs that intersected, forming a kind of mathematical butterfly. He layered lines across it, altered their density to imply movement, then shifted the angle, letting the entire structure appear to weave between dimensions. He didn't explain in numbers. He narrated in metaphor. Imagine you're watching wind push across a pond, he said. You can't see the wind, but the ripples tell you where it's been. That's what these vectors are. Echoes of unseen forces. The Drexen observers didn't flinch, but the accordion creature made a rustling noise that might have been a gasp. He added a spiral that looped through the center of the structure, then let it unravel into a grid. This is where most of you get stuck, Quinn said. You try to isolate each variable, but the variables are dancing. Lock one down and the whole thing trips. He paused and turned to the candidates. Now you try. The grid reset. Blank again. The green-skinned biped stepped forward, stylus in hand. It hesitated. Quinn crossed his arms. Don't think, just sketch the motion. The creature drew a jagged line, hesitated, then tried again, this time with a smoother arc. It wasn't right, but it was close. The second candidate, a feathered being with a beak and 3-pronged feet, used its talon to trace a series of concentric circles. Too static. Quinn shook his head. Make it move. The third, a gelatinous mass with a shimmer of iridescence, produced a series of interlocking swirls that collapsed into a central point. Quinn raised an eyebrow. That's not terrible. Norat made a clicking sound. The demonstration is complete. Proceed to verbal reflection. The feathered one tilted its head. Your method prioritizes non-linear representation over symbolic reduction. Is this due to cognitive limitation? Quinn shrugged. It's due to the fact that I'm not a calculator. I don't reduce, I reshape. The green biped leaned forward. But without formal structure, how do you ensure consistency? I don't need structure, I need symmetry. The consistency comes from the pattern, not the notation. The gelatinous one pulsed faintly. Your method is chaotic. It's intuitive, Quinn replied. Chaos has rules if you know how to look. The panel of observers conferred quietly. Norat tapped something into a terminal. This concludes the trial. Your method is recognized as valid under adaptive cognitive classification. No further demonstration is required. Quinn blinked. Wait, that's it? Your method is not replicable by most species, however, its results are verifiable. You are absolved from further pedagogy. So I passed by being impossible to teach. You passed by being useful. Quinn rubbed the back of his neck. That's a first. He left the chamber with the gelatinous candidate trailing behind. Your diagrams, it said, resonate with my thermal memory nodes. I may pursue further study. Thanks, I guess. Just don't copy my hand posture. I nearly gave myself permanent nerve damage. I possess no hands. Lucky you. Later that cycle, Quinn found himself in the observation dome, staring out at the nearby gas giant. Rejoined him without saying anything, holding a container of something warm and vaguely purple. They cleared you, she asked. Apparently I'm officially unteachable but acceptable. That tracks. He accepted the drink. It smelled like cinnamon and copper. They also said I don't have to do any more demonstrations. She frowned. You okay with that? I thought I'd be relieved, he admitted. But now it feels like I've been boxed up and shelved. You could still share the method, just not through formal channels. With who? Velit's too busy dissecting his own conclusions and Chlorat's pretending he didn't start all this. Ree leaned back against the railing. You started it. He glanced sideways. You think that's a good thing. You made them see something new. Doesn't matter if they can't follow it. They stood in silence for a while. The gas giant shimmered, its outer bands catching light from the nearest star. Finally, Quinn set the drink down. I think I'm done. Done with what? Trying to prove anything. I'm going to draw things the way I see them. If someone wants to learn, fine. If not, also fine, she nodded. So what's next? He pulled out a fresh pad and sketched a helix that dissolved into petals. Nothing, just this. I've got a shape in my head I haven't figured out yet. Ree watched the lines form, then pulled out a chair and sat beside him. You really can't stop, can you? He didn't answer, just kept drawing. The pattern unfolded slowly, curling in on itself, then reaching outward. It wasn't a solution. It wasn't a demonstration. It was just motion, captured in stillness. By the time the dome lights dimmed for rest cycle, he'd finished the shape. He looked at it, smiled faintly, and shut the pad. Then he walked out, leaving the pattern behind.